My name is Rachel Moore. I'm 35 years old, and I've always believed that kindness, hard work, and honesty could open any door. I worked at Stonebridge Consulting, a mid-sized firm in Chicago that handled marketing strategies for big brands. For 3 years, I poured everything I had into that job, late nights, skipped lunches, and weekend calls that never seemed to end. I wasn't the loudest or the most confident, but I was dependable. Everyone said so. But sometimes, life doesn't care how dedicated you are. The email came on a cold Tuesday morning, right after my mother's funeral. I had just returned home, still in black, when my phone buzzed. It was from Mr. Bennett, my boss. The subject line read, "Urgent. Work priorities." I opened it and my heart froze. "Rachel, after careful consideration, we've decided to terminate your employment with Stonebridge Consulting. While your dedication is appreciated, we need people who prioritize their work. We wish you the best in your future endeavors." That was it. No warning. No phone call. Just a few cold sentences. I sat staring at the screen, numb. The same man who had hugged me 3 days earlier and said, "Take all the time you need, Rachel. Family comes first," had fired me for doing exactly that. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just packed my few office things, my coffee mug, my notepad, a photo of my mother smiling, and left the building quietly when I went to clear my desk the next morning. Some coworkers looked away, others whispered. Nobody dared to ask what had happened. But 5 days later, something strange happened. The regional manager, a man I'd never even spoken to before, called my phone in a total panic. His voice was shaky. "Rachel, please tell me you're okay. We need to talk. Immediately." And that's where my story truly begins. Before we go deeper, let me ask you, where are you watching from? Because this story isn't just about me losing a job. It's about life, empathy, and how sometimes the people who do the quiet right thing end up shaking the whole system without even meaning to. 2 months before all this, life had been ordinary. I was the kind of person who greeted everyone at work, security guards, janitors, interns. I wasn't rich, but I lived a decent life in a small apartment downtown. Every Friday, my mom, Linda Moore, called me. She was my biggest cheerleader, kind, funny, and a woman who could make a stranger feel at home within seconds. But cancer doesn't care about kindness either. When she was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, everything changed. I'd visit her hospital bed every evening after work, holding her fragile hand, pretending not to cry when she'd say, "Rachel, promise me you'll live your life fully, even when I'm gone." Her words stayed with me like a whisper I couldn't escape. At work, things were tense. My boss, Mr. Bennett, was the type who wore expensive suits and measured people's worth in hours billed. He was brilliant but cold, the kind of man who thought emotions were weaknesses. Still, he seemed to have a soft spot for me, or so I thought. When Mom passed away, I emailed him that morning. "Hi, Mr. Bennett. I'm deeply sorry to inform you that my mother passed away this morning. I'll need to take 3 days off to arrange her funeral. I hope you understand." His reply came within minutes. "Of course, Rachel. Take all the time you need. Family first." I cried when I read that. I thought it was kindness. I thought maybe, just maybe, people at work could still be human. The funeral was small but beautiful. My mom had always loved lilacs, so I filled the church with them. The pastor said, "A mother's love never ends. It just changes homes." That line broke me. But after everyone left, I noticed something strange. My work phone had 23 missed calls, all from the office. I ignored them. I wasn't ready to think about deadlines when my world had just collapsed. On the third night, I sat by the window, watching the city lights. My best friend Lena, who worked in HR at another company, came by with soup and said, "Rach, you look exhausted. Are you sure your boss is fine with the leave?" I nodded. He approved it. Why wouldn't he be? She sighed. "I've seen bosses change their tone fast when it affects numbers. Just be careful." I laughed softly. What's the worst that can happen? Fire me for going to my mother's funeral? If only I knew. The day I returned to work, everything felt off. People avoided eye contact. My desk had been cleared except for a small cardboard box. Inside were my personal things and a printed copy of that email. When I walked into Mr. Bennett's office, he didn't even look up from his laptop. "Rachel, this wasn't an easy decision," he said flatly. "But you were unreachable during a client emergency. We lost a deal because you weren't available." I swallowed hard. "Sir, I told you my mother died." "I couldn't." He raised his hand to stop me. "We all have personal challenges, Rachel. The company needs people who can balance them." That line cut deeper than anything I'd ever heard. I stood there for a long second, staring at him. "Balance," I repeated quietly. "My mother's funeral wasn't a challenge, Mr. Bennett. It was a loss." He didn't respond. So I just smiled faintly, nodded, and said, "Thank you for the opportunity." Then I walked out. No tears, no begging. I didn't even send an appeal to HR. But that night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, a small thought crept into my mind. Something about how he said client emergency. And the next morning, when I opened my LinkedIn, I saw something that made my stomach twist. Stonebridge Consulting had just lost one of their biggest accounts. And the client's name? Moore Industries. My late mother's family company. She had never told me much about it. She'd said they had family in Toronto who ran things quietly, and she preferred to live a simple life away from the corporate mess. I hadn't thought about it since I was a teenager, but that name on my screen, Moore Industries, was like a spark in the dark. Still, I brushed it off. I wasn't thinking of revenge or power or anything like that. I just wanted peace. But fate wasn't done with me yet. Because 5 days later, I woke up to 32 missed calls. The regional manager, Mr. Adams, finally reached me around noon. His voice trembled like he'd seen a ghost. "Rachel, please tell me you're okay," he said, almost whispering. We need to talk. Immediately." I frowned. "About what?" He hesitated. "About everything. Just please come to the office. It's urgent." And that's when I knew something big had just happened. Something I wasn't prepared for. But what? What could possibly make the regional manager panic over a woman they fired 5 days ago? The answer would change everything. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time, staring at my phone after the call ended. The regional manager's voice had carried something I hadn't heard from anyone at Stonebridge before: fear. Not the kind that comes from deadlines or bad numbers, but the kind that makes people lose sleep. For a moment, I wondered if I should just ignore him. I didn't owe them anything. They tossed me aside like I was disposable, like my mother's death was an inconvenience. But curiosity is a strange thing. It grows roots before you can stop it. By 9 a.m., I was dressed and standing outside the glass doors of Stonebridge Consulting again. My reflection in the building's surface looked unfamiliar. Tired eyes, hair tied back, a calm I didn't quite feel. Inside, people looked up as I walked past. Whispers followed me like echoes. Some were surprised, others just looked nervous. When I reached the front desk, the receptionist, Amy, blinked twice before saying, "Oh, Ms. Moore, they said you might come. Mr. Adams is waiting in the conference room." I walked down the hallway, each step heavier than the last. When I opened the door, Mr. Adams, the regional manager, was pacing the room. He looked around 50, salt and pepper hair, expensive suit, and a face that usually screamed control. But today, he looked like he hadn't slept in days. When he saw me, he froze. "Rachel, thank God you came." I crossed my arms. "You fired me 5 days ago, Mr. Adams. What could possibly be that urgent?" He motioned for me to sit. "Please hear me out first." I stayed standing. He sighed and rubbed his forehead. "I just found out what happened with Mr. Bennett. I want you to know that was never authorized by upper management. He acted on his own." I raised an eyebrow. "And now you're realizing that?" He hesitated. "It's more complicated than that." Something in his tone sent a chill through me. He continued, "Do you remember the Moore Industries account?" I blinked. "Yes. I saw a post on LinkedIn. They dropped you, didn't they?" He nodded grimly. "Not just dropped us, they pulled out of every pending contract and demanded a public apology from our CEO. Do you know what they said?" I shook my head slowly. He picked up a printed email from the table and handed it to me.
It read,
"We will no longer associate with companies that demonstrate inhumanity toward their employees. Our decision is final." And at the bottom, signed in bold, Eleanor Moore, Chairwoman, Moore Industries. My hands trembled slightly. Eleanor Moore. My grandmother. The grandmother I hadn't seen in 20 years. Mr. Adams didn't notice my reaction. He was too busy talking. "Apparently, she found out about what happened to you, the termination after your mother's funeral, and she's furious. She's influential, Rachel. Her company controls contracts worth tens of millions across North America. Do you see our situation now?" I stared at him in disbelief. "So, now you care?" He flinched. "Rachel, listen. I didn't know about the approval or the context. Bennett told us you'd abandoned your role during a critical client crisis. He claimed you were unreachable and didn't inform anyone. We were misled." I shook my head slowly. "He lied, and you believed him. That's all." He swallowed hard. "I'm not proud of that. But now, things have gotten out of control. The board is furious, and Stonebridge's reputation is sinking fast. We've lost 2 more clients since Monday." I crossed my arms tighter. "And what does that have to do with me?" He looked desperate now. "Eleanor Moore is refusing to meet anyone from Stonebridge except you. She says, and I quote, 'I'll only speak to my granddaughter.'" The words echoed in my head like thunder. Granddaughter. He didn't know I hadn't spoken to her since I was 15. After my parents' divorce, my mother had cut all ties with that side of the family. She wanted a simple life, away from wealth and control. I'd never even told anyone at work that my grandmother owned Moore Industries. I took a shaky breath. "She knows?" Mr. Adams nodded slowly.
"Yes."
"Apparently, she's been following your career quietly for years. And when she learned that you were fired like this, she called every major partner we have." He leaned forward. "Rachel, please. We're begging you to come to a meeting with her and the CEO. You can fix this. Just talk to her." For a long moment, I said nothing. I was still processing everything, the firing, the lies, and now this. A powerful grandmother who'd been watching me silently all along. But then another feeling started to rise. Not fear. Not guilt. Control. For once, I had it. I finally said, "I'll think about it." He blinked. "You'll what?" "I'll think about it," I repeated. "You didn't think about my mother's funeral before you destroyed my career. So forgive me if I take a little time to think before saving yours." He opened his mouth to speak, but I turned and walked out before he could. Outside, the air felt sharper, almost electric. I stood on the sidewalk, staring at the tall glass building that had once made me proud to work there. Now, it just looked like a cage I'd escaped. I walked to the park nearby and sat on a bench. Kids were playing, dogs running, the world moving like nothing had changed. But inside me, something had shifted. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through old photos of my mom. There was one of her smiling in our kitchen, flower on her cheek, holding a pie. I could almost hear her voice again. "Rachel, don't let anyone make you small. You're stronger than you think." I whispered. "You were right, Mom." Then my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. The message read, "Rachel, this is Eleanor Moore. We need to talk. Today." My heart stopped. She knew. She was reaching out. After 20 years of silence, I stared at the message for a full minute before replying. "Where?" The response came instantly. "Moore Tower, Toronto. Noon tomorrow. Come alone." That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, memories of my grandmother's mansion flashed before me. The marble staircase, the gold-framed portraits, her cold stare the day my mother packed our bags and left. Now, she wanted to see me. Was it out of love? Or revenge? When morning came, I booked the first flight to Toronto. I didn't tell anyone, not even Lena. On the plane, I stared out the window as clouds drifted past. My heart was pounding, but there was something else beneath the fear. Curiosity. Maybe even hope. When I arrived at Moore Tower, I could feel the weight of wealth in the air. Polished marble floors, walls lined with awards, and a receptionist who said, "Ms. Moore, they've been expecting you." She led me to a private elevator. My reflection stared back at me in the metal doors as they closed. Me, the woman they'd fired for mourning her mother, about to walk into the world of power my family had once abandoned. When the doors opened, I stepped into a sunlit office overlooking the city. And there she was, Eleanor Moore. Silver hair perfectly styled, pearl necklace, sharp eyes that missed nothing. She turned as I walked in, her expression unreadable. "Rachel," she said softly, "you look just like your mother." For a second, I couldn't breathe. Then she added, her tone turning icy, "Sit down. We have much to discuss about Stonebridge and about what comes next." The air in the room grew thick. Something told me that whatever happened next would change everything I thought I knew about my family, my job, and myself. The moment I sat down across from my grandmother, I felt like a child again, small, unsure, trapped in a room too grand for my own heartbeat. The walls of her office were lined with framed headlines. "Moore Industries expands into global energy. Eleanor Moore named Businesswoman of the Year." Her name was power, printed in gold, and for the first time in 20 years, that power was staring directly at me. She was silent for a while, studying me like someone reading an old book they'd almost forgotten existed. Finally, she spoke. "I heard about what happened," she said, voice calm but sharp. 3 days off for your mother's funeral, and they fired you. Ruthless." I nodded. That's one word for it. Her lips pressed together. "I assume you didn't fight back?" I shook my head. "No." I didn't see the point. That seemed to annoy her. "You should have. The world doesn't respect quiet people, Rachel." I smiled faintly. Mom used to say that sometimes silence speaks loud enough. Her eyes flickered, something between pride and pain. Then she stood and walked to the window, looking out over the Toronto skyline. "Your mother," she was too soft. "She hated everything about this life. When she left, I told her she'd regret it. She turned to face me, and now she's gone." I felt my chest tighten. She may have left the company, but she didn't regret it. She chose peace. And I respect that. Eleanor's gaze sharpened. "Peace doesn't build empires." "Empires don't bring happiness," I shot back quietly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The tension between us was heavy, but beneath it, I sensed something else. Curiosity. Maybe even guilt. She walked back to her desk, sat down, and folded her hands. "You were wronged, Rachel. Stonebridge acted cruelly. And I don't tolerate cruelty. So, I've decided to intervene." I frowned. "Intervene how?" She smiled slightly. "Let's just say Stonebridge's executives are already panicking. Their investors are threatening to pull out. Their reputation is sinking by the hour. And now they're begging for mercy." I leaned forward. "And you're enjoying it." She didn't deny it. "I'm ensuring justice. But I also see an opportunity." "An opportunity," I repeated warily. Her eyes gleamed. "To teach them a lesson, and to give you a new beginning." Before I could respond, she slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents, business proposals, contracts, and one title that made my pulse quicken. Appointment: Rachel Moore, Director of Public Relations, Moore Industries. I looked up in shock. "You're offering me a job?" "Not just a job," she said calmly. "A platform. You'll represent the company publicly during this entire Stonebridge fallout. You'll tell your story, the truth. People need to hear it." I hesitated. "You want me to use my story to destroy them?" Eleanor leaned back. "No, dear. I want you to reveal them. There's a difference." I stared at the papers. For years, I'd worked under people who never saw me as anything more than a replaceable cog. And now, here I was, being handed a chance not just to stand up for myself, but for every worker who'd ever been treated like they didn't matter. Still, something inside me whispered caution. "Why me?" I asked quietly. After 20 years of silence, why now? For a split second, her confident mask cracked. Her voice softened. "Because I failed your mother. And I won't fail you." I blinked, stunned. I'd never heard her sound human before. She took a deep breath. When your mother left, I was angry, too proud to admit I missed her. When she got sick, she didn't tell me until it was too late. I tried to visit, but she refused. She didn't want me to interfere. Her eyes glistened slightly. When I learned she died, I realized I'd lost both of you. And then 3 days later, I saw your name trending online. Someone had leaked the termination email from Stonebridge. People were furious on your behalf. It spread everywhere. I froze. Leaked? Who leaked it? Eleanor gave a faint smile. Does it matter? I frowned. Did you do it? She didn't answer, but her silence said enough. I leaned back, my mind racing. The viral outrage, the sudden apology statements I'd seen from random corporate accounts. Everything made sense now. She'd set this in motion. Why go this far? I asked. You could have just called me. Because people only listen when something burns, she said. And I wanted them to listen. Later that evening, she invited me to dinner in her private penthouse on the top floor of the tower. The place was like a museum. Marble floors, glass chandeliers, a grand piano that looked untouched. The dining table could have seated 20, but only 2 plates were set. As we ate, she told me stories of her youth, how she'd built more industries from scratch after my grandfather died, how she'd lost friends, sleep, and love to ambition. Then, halfway through dessert, she looked at me and said, "You remind me of her. The same fire, the same kindness. But you're standing where she refused to. Don't waste this chance, Rachel. Use it." Her words hung in the air long after dinner ended. When I returned to my guest room that night, I stood by the window and stared at the glowing city below. I thought about everything. My mother's funeral, my firing, this sudden twist of fate. Part of me wanted to accept her offer, to step into the light and show the world that people like Mr. Bennet couldn't silence compassion. But another part of me hesitated. My mother had run from this life for a reason. Could I walk into it without losing myself? The next morning, I woke up to chaos. My phone buzzed nonstop, news alerts, missed calls, messages from former coworkers. When I opened one link, my heart skipped. Breaking news: Stonebridge Consulting faces lawsuit threats after employee fired during funeral. There it was, my story. Everywhere. My name. My face. Even a photo of my mother. It was trending across Twitter, LinkedIn, and business forums. Hashtag Justice for Rachel Moore was the top hashtag. And beneath the articles were comments, some kind, some angry, some shocked. She did nothing wrong. How heartless can a company be? Boycott Stonebridge. And then I saw a familiar name comment under one post. Mr. Bennet. This situation is being exaggerated. The employee in question was not terminated for personal reasons, but for professional misconduct. My stomach twisted. He was lying again. A fire lit inside me, burning hotter than grief or fear. I opened the folder Eleanor had given me the day before and stared at the contract again. Maybe it was time to stop being quiet. I signed. By the end of that day, Moore Industries released an official statement. We have appointed Rachel Moore as Director of Public Relations. Her courage and integrity will help redefine what corporate compassion should look like. The news went viral instantly. People were cheering. Messages poured into my inbox, strangers thanking me for standing up, others sharing their own workplace horror stories. But while the world was applauding, someone else was furious. That night, I received a voicemail. I pressed play. Mr. Bennet's voice. Cold. Sharp. Congratulations, Rachel. Enjoy your 15 minutes. But you don't know what you've started. Then the line went dead. My heart pounded. I stared at the phone for a long time, the city lights flickering behind me. I didn't know what he meant, but his tone made one thing clear: Stonebridge wasn't done fighting. And neither was I. That voicemail played in my head all night. You don't know what you've started. The words were cold, almost like a warning, and though part of me wanted to ignore them, another part couldn't. I'd worked under Mr. Bennet for 3 years. I knew the way his mind worked. He wasn't the kind of man to let something go quietly. He was the type who smiled during storms and plotted revenge while everyone else was sleeping. By the next morning, I was back in Moore Tower, walking through the sleek glass hallways that now somehow belonged to my new life. People greeted me with polite smiles. "Good morning, Ms. Moore," but I could sense curiosity behind every look.
They knew who I was now.
They'd read my story. In less than a week, I'd gone from being a fired employee to a public symbol of corporate injustice. My photo was on business blogs, my interviews scheduled for primetime news. But behind every headline was the same silent question. Would she fight back or fade away? When I entered the top-floor meeting room, my grandmother, Eleanor, was already there with two other executives. She was scrolling through her tablet, eyes sharp as ever. "Good morning, Rachel," she said without looking up. "You're trending again." I took a seat. "For better or worse?" She gave a half-smile. "For better. Mostly. You're being praised as the voice of fairness in corporate America." I exhaled. I didn't mean for any of this to become this big. Eleanor finally looked up.
"Good.
That means you still have humility. But remember, fame is just a storm. It passes fast. What lasts is what you do with it." Her tone softened slightly. "Have you thought about the press conference?" I nodded.
Yes.
"I'll do it."
Good, she said.
"Because Stonebridge has just gone public with a statement. They're calling your termination a misunderstanding and offering a formal apology." I frowned. "A misunderstanding?" "They fired me for going to my mother's funeral." "Yes," she said coolly. "And now they're trying to rewrite the story." She slid a printed page across the table. It was an email from Stonebridge's PR team. "We deeply regret any distress caused to Ms. Moore. Stonebridge Consulting upholds compassion as a core value. We look forward to resolving this unfortunate incident with dignity and mutual respect." I could almost hear Mr. Bennett's voice behind those fake words. The same man who told me, "We need people who prioritize their work." Eleanor's eyes met mine. "So? What do you want to do about it?" I looked down at the paper again. I could stay quiet, let them control the story, and they'd win. Or I could speak up, tell the truth, and risk everything that came with it. "I want to tell my side," I said firmly. Eleanor's lips curved. "Good. Then let's prepare you." For the next few days, I trained with Moore Industries' PR team, learning how to handle reporters, how to stay calm under pressure, how to turn questions into lessons instead of attacks. But no matter how many times we rehearsed, one thing felt off. This wasn't about business for me.
It was about dignity.
Every night, I'd think of Mom. I could almost hear her saying, "Don't fight because you're angry, Rachel. Fight because you know it's right." By Friday morning, the press conference hall was full. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered, and my name echoed through the room. When I stepped up to the podium, a hush fell. My palms were damp, but I forced myself to smile. "Good morning," I began. "My name is Rachel Moore. I was an employee at Stonebridge Consulting for 3 years. Last month, I took 3 days off to attend my mother's funeral, a leave that was approved. When I returned, I was fired by email." The room stayed silent. You could hear the clicks of pens, the hum of lights. "I didn't come here to destroy a company," I continued. "I came here to remind people that compassion should never be treated as weakness. We talk about productivity, about profits, about growth, but we forget that behind every company, there are people. And people grieve. People hurt. People deserve humanity." A few gasps rippled through the crowd. Reporters scribbled furiously. I took a breath. When my boss said, "We need people who prioritize their work," I realized something. He wasn't talking about dedication. He was talking about obedience. And I won't apologize for choosing my mother's funeral over a deadline. The cameras flashed brighter now. I'm standing here today not because I'm powerful, but because I'm tired of silence. Every employee deserves dignity, and no job should ever punish someone for being human. When I stepped away from the microphone, applause erupted. It wasn't polite. It was fierce, emotional, raw. People stood up. Some even wiped their eyes. But amid the noise, I noticed one thing, a tall figure near the back of the hall, watching quietly. Mr. Bennett. He didn't clap. He didn't move. He just stood there, his eyes fixed on me like a storm waiting to break. Later that night, as I sat in the back of a black sedan heading back to Moore Tower, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a voicemail, it was a message. From unknown number. You think this is over? You have no idea who you're dealing with. Check tomorrow's headlines. My stomach dropped. When I reached the tower, Eleanor was already in her study, watching the news. She looked up when I entered, her expression unreadable.
Good speech, she said.
But Bennett's not done. What do you mean?
I asked. She pointed at the TV.
He's already moving to protect himself. He's saying you violated confidentiality agreements, that you leaked internal company information to damage their reputation. I froze. That's not true. Of course it's not, she said, but the court of public opinion doesn't wait for truth. It just reacts. I sat down heavily. So what now? Eleanor stood, her eyes blazing. Now, we don't play defense. We play offense. The next day, the headlines exploded again. Stonebridge CEO accuses Rachel Moore of breach of contract. Whistleblower or opportunist. Former employee under fire. Just like that, the sympathy started to fade. Some commenters doubted me. Others said I was using my mother's death for attention. The internet that had once defended me was now tearing me apart. I turned off my phone and stared at the city from my window. My heart ached, not from fear, but from betrayal. Eleanor entered quietly. I told you, she said softly. Power never forgives exposure. But this, she held up her tablet, showing a document. This could change everything. I looked closer and felt my breath hitch. It was a confidential email chain between Mr. Bennett and other Stonebridge executives, dated the day after I took leave. Terminate Moore immediately. We can't afford emotional liabilities. I'll handle HR if anyone questions it. It was proof. Undeniable. I looked up at my grandmother. Where did you get this? Her expression didn't change. Let's just say I have people who owe me favors. For a long moment, I said nothing. Then, quietly, if we release this, it'll destroy them. She nodded. And clear. You completely. I hesitated. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted the truth out. But maybe the truth was revenge in this case. I finally said, do it. Eleanor smiled faintly. Already did. The next morning, every major network was covering the leak. Reporters played the email chain on screen. Stonebridge's CEO held an emergency meeting. Mr. Bennett was suspended pending investigation. Public opinion swung back overnight. Suddenly, I wasn't the villain. I was the woman who stood up against corporate cruelty and won. But even as messages of support flooded in, something inside me felt uneasy. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't over. That evening, Eleanor and I had dinner together again. She was unusually quiet. What happens now? I asked. She looked at me, her eyes thoughtful. Now, Stonebridge will burn. But there's something you don't know yet. Something I need to tell you about your mother. I froze. What about her? Eleanor hesitated, then whispered, her death, it wasn't as simple as you think. The room went still. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked away. There's a reason she left this family, Rachel. And a reason she made sure you never came back. My pulse quickened. What reason? She met my eyes, her expression grave. Because someone at Stonebridge wasn't just your boss. He was once part of our family. The fork slipped from my hand and clattered on the table. Who? I breathed. Eleanor leaned in, her voice almost trembling. Mr. Bennett. I felt the ground tilt beneath me. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming across my face. For the first time in weeks, I hadn't woken up dreading the day. I had a plan, a purpose, and I was done letting people walk over me. I made breakfast for Emma, then packed my laptop and headed to the coffee shop downtown where I used to go during college. The same cozy wooden tables, the same smell of roasted beans and caramel syrup. I opened my laptop, took a deep breath, and began typing my resignation letter. Not to Harbor and Crane, of course, but to the version of myself that had always accepted less than she deserved. That version of me was gone. I spent the entire day applying for jobs. nonprofits, remote marketing firms, even a few PR agencies that matched my style. By evening, I had rewritten my resume and created a short online portfolio. It felt liberating, like I was finally choosing myself. But that night, while washing dishes, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello. Is this Emily Harper?" A man asked in a low, serious voice. "Yes, who's this?" "This is Detective Jason Miller from the Minneapolis Police Department. We're following up on an incident report connected to Harper and Crane Consulting. Would you be available for a few questions tomorrow?" I froze, my hands still dripping with soap. An incident report? About what? "I'd prefer not to discuss details over the phone, ma'am. But it concerns your former supervisor, Ms. Carol Jensen." My pulse quickened. "Is she okay?" There was a short pause.
She's alive.
"That's all I can say for now. We'd just like to speak with you in person." When the call ended, I stood there, staring at the bubbles floating over the sink, my mind racing. Carol? Why would the police want to talk to me about her? Had she done something illegal? Or worse, was she claiming I had? The next morning, I met Detective Miller at the downtown precinct. He was tall, mid-40s, with a calm, direct tone. He motioned for me to sit. "Miss Harper, we appreciate you coming in. I'll get straight to the point. You were recently employed under Carol Jensen, correct?"
Yes.
"Until last week."
Right.
"We're investigating reports of workplace misconduct, possible financial tampering, and document forgery. Carol Jensen was placed under review after several internal complaints surfaced, some involving HR records and falsified approvals." My jaw dropped. "Wait, you mean she?" He nodded. "It appears she manipulated internal approval documents and staff evaluations. You mentioned you had an approved leave request for your mother's funeral?" "Yes," I said quietly. "She approved it herself." "Well," he said, flipping through his notes, "records show she altered that approval and deleted the authorization trail, then marked you as absent without cause. That's what led to your termination email." I felt my stomach twist. "So she set me up." "It appears that way," he confirmed. "Her superior, Mr. Donahue, was unaware of the falsifications. But since your termination, several employees have come forward with similar experiences." I sat there, numb, as he handed me a printed statement. "We'd like you to provide a written account of your interactions with her, especially surrounding your leave and termination." I nodded slowly. "Of course." When I left the station, I sat in my car for a long time, hands trembling on the steering wheel. All those sleepless nights, the shame, the anxiety, it wasn't my fault. Carol had been lying to everyone. By evening, my phone rang again. This time it was an email alert from Harper and Crane's official address. Subject line: urgent, formal apology and employment reinstatement. My heart skipped. I opened it and nearly dropped the phone. "Dear Ms. Harper, we wish to extend our sincerest apologies regarding your recent termination. After a comprehensive investigation, it has come to our attention that serious internal misconduct led to the wrongful dismissal of several employees, including yourself. We would like to offer immediate reinstatement with full back pay and compensation. The regional manager, Mr. Grant, has requested to speak with you personally. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience. Sincerely, HR Department, Harper and Crane Consulting." I laughed, a short, shaky, disbelieving laugh. Just a week ago, I'd been tossed aside like garbage. Now they were begging me to return. But as I stared at the email, a cold thought crept in. Why the urgency? Why had the regional manager himself, the one who'd ignored every complaint, suddenly become personally involved? I wasn't sure if this was redemption or the start of something darker.
My phone buzzed again.
Another email popped up, this time from an unfamiliar address, no subject line. It simply read, "Don't go back, Emily. You don't know what they've done." I gasped, staring at the screen. The message vanished a second later, deleted itself automatically. And that's when the panic truly began. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house made me jump. My mind kept replaying the words from that mysterious message. Don't go back, Emily. You don't know what they've done. I stared at my phone's black screen for hours, wondering who could have sent it. Was it someone from the company? A friend of Carol's? Or maybe another employee who knew what was happening behind closed doors? By morning, my curiosity had turned into unease. I needed answers, not from the police, not from HR, but from the regional manager himself. So, I called the number from the email. Harbor and Crane Consulting. This is Mr. Grant's office. A woman's voice answered briskly. Hi, this is Emily Harper. I was asked to contact Mr. Grant about.
Oh.
Miss Harper, yes, he's been expecting your call. There was a rustle of papers. He's actually in the Minneapolis branch today. Can you come by in an hour? I hesitated. Every instinct told me to stay away. But another part of me, the part that needed closure, said I had to go. So I got dressed, straightened my hair, and put on my favorite navy blazer. The one I wore on my first day at Harbor and Crane. When I arrived, the office looked exactly as I remembered. Cold, white walls, polished floors, that faint smell of coffee and disinfectant. Only this time, the atmosphere was thick with tension. People whispered in corners, avoided eye contact. A tall, silver-haired man approached. Miss Harper, he said warmly, extending his hand. I'm David Grant. Thank you for coming. I shook his hand cautiously. I wasn't sure if I should. He smiled tightly. I understand. Please have a seat. We sat in his glass-walled office, overlooking the city. I'll be direct, he began. What happened to you was inexcusable. Carol Jensen's actions went unnoticed far too long, and the company bears responsibility for that. I folded my hands on my lap. So, she really forged those documents? She did more than that, he said, lowering his voice. She redirected project funds, falsified leave approvals, and manipulated HR systems to cover her tracks. You were one of several employees she targeted. We believe she did it to hide her financial misconduct. I blinked, stunned. Why target me? Because, he said, tapping a file on his desk, you were next in line for her position. She viewed you as a threat. The words hit me like a wave. I hadn't even known I was being considered for a promotion. He slid a letter toward me. We'd like to offer you reinstatement at a higher position, full salary, and a signing bonus. You deserve it. I looked down at the letter, then back up at him. And what about Carol? Terminated, he said flatly, and facing legal consequences. But he hesitated, choosing his words carefully. She's been unreachable since the investigation started. Police are still looking for her. I swallowed. Unreachable? You mean she's gone, he finished. Her apartment's empty. No forwarding address. A chill crept through me. And you still want me to come back here? Emily, he said gently, Harbor and Crane needs someone with integrity. We need to rebuild, and you're the kind of person who can help us do that. He stood, extending his hand again. Welcome back if you'll have us. I didn't take his hand right away. My mind was spinning, Carol missing, the cryptic warning, and now this too convenient offer. Something didn't add up. Still, I took the envelope, thanked him politely, and left. On the drive home, I kept glancing in my rearview mirror. A dark SUV seemed to be following me, keeping 2 cars back, never overtaking, never falling away. When I turned down my street, it turned too. I pulled into my driveway and sat still, heart pounding. The SUV slowed, then drove past. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe I was just paranoid. That night, while tucking Emma into bed, I found another envelope, slipped through the mail slot. My name written across it in black ink. No stamp. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single photo of me standing in the Harbor and Crane lobby earlier that day. Someone had taken it without my knowledge. Underneath, written in neat handwriting, "You are never supposed to come back." I froze, the air draining from my lungs. I rushed to the door, flung it open, and peered out into the dark street. But there was no one there, only the faint hum of crickets and the wind brushing against the trees. My phone rang again, same unknown number as before. With trembling hands, I answered. A distorted voice whispered, They're watching you, Emily.
Don't trust Grant.
Don't trust anyone from that office. Then silence. I dropped the phone, my pulse thundering. For the first time since my mother's funeral, I felt something deeper than grief. It was fear. Real, bone-deep fear. And somewhere out there, in the dark, I knew someone was pulling strings, and I was just beginning to see the web I'd been caught in. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise, not because of the alarm, but because of the unease gnawing at my chest. The photo, the call, the SUV, it all felt too orchestrated to be random. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the note again. You were never supposed to come back. Emma stirred in her sleep, clutching her teddy bear. I took a deep breath and whispered to myself, you can't let fear win. After making sure she was safely dropped off at school, I drove straight to the police station to meet Detective Miller again. He looked up as soon as I entered, his face tightening when he saw the photo and note. You found this where? Stuffed through my mail slot last night, I said. There was no return address. I think someone's been following me. He leaned back, his expression grim. You did the right thing coming here. We've been monitoring the situation since Carol disappeared, and you might not want to hear this, but you could be connected to why she vanished. My stomach dropped. Connected how? He flipped through his notepad. According to our latest intel, Carol may have been working with someone inside Harbor and Crane, a senior executive. When she realized we were closing in, she took evidence that could expose both of them. And if she thought you knew anything, she'd see me as a threat. I finished softly. He nodded. That's our working theory. Whoever sent that message last night might be trying to warn you, or scare you into silence. Then who's watching me? I asked. The SUV, the phone calls. We don't know yet, he admitted. But we'll assign a patrol near your neighborhood for the next few days. Do not contact anyone from the company. Not even Mr. Grant. Understood. I nodded, clutching my purse. As I left the station, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone's eyes were still on me. Even there, even in broad daylight. By the time I got home, my nerves were on fire. I locked every door, checked every window. Then I made tea and tried to calm down. That's when my laptop pinged. A new email had arrived, no sender address again, just a subject line. You deserve to know the truth. I hesitated, then clicked. A video file began to download. The moment it opened, my blood ran cold. It was footage from the Harbor and Crane security cameras, dated 3 days before I was fired. The video showed Carol in her office, pacing nervously. Then the door opened. David Grant, the regional manager, walked in. They were arguing. No sound, but Carol's gestures were frantic. She slammed a folder onto the desk. He stepped forward, grabbed her arm, and pointed toward the window. Then he said something that made her freeze. She looked terrified. He leaned closer, whispering something into her ear, and she nodded slowly, shaking. The video ended there. A line of text appeared beneath it. She found out what Grant was doing. She was silenced before she could talk. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering. My fingers trembled as I replayed the footage over and over. David Grant, the man who'd just offered me my job back, who'd smiled politely and promised justice, had been meeting with Carol in secret right before she disappeared. It all made sense now. The company wasn't cleaning up Carol's mess. They were covering it up. Before I could even process what to do next, headlights swept across my window. I froze, peeking through the curtain. The same black SUV from before was idling in front of my house. My phone buzzed, another unknown number. I answered with shaking hands. Who is this? A familiar male voice came through, calm and deliberate. Emily, it's David Grant. I think we need to talk. My throat went dry. How did you get this number? He chuckled softly. You didn't think I'd lose track of my best employee, did you? Stay away from me, I hissed. Now, that's not very polite, he said, his tone turning colder. You've been speaking with the police. You've seen things you shouldn't have. Let's not make this worse than it needs to be. What do you want? I demanded. He paused. Come with me. Quietly. There's more to this than you think. Carol was never innocent, and you don't know what she did before she ran. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. You're lying. Am I? He said smoothly. If you want the truth, come outside. I'll explain everything. I hung up immediately and called Detective Miller, my voice shaking as I explained what had just happened. Stay inside, Emily, he said firmly. We're on our way. Minutes felt like hours. The SUV outside stayed put, engine humming softly. Then, suddenly, the headlights turned off. Silence. I peeked again. The vehicle was gone. When the police finally arrived, they searched the area but found nothing. No SUV, no footprints, no trace. Later that night, I sat on my couch, exhausted, terrified, but strangely calm. Because I knew one thing now for certain. I wasn't crazy. Something dark had been happening at Harbor and Crane, and Carol, for all her cruelty, had gotten caught in the middle of it. I opened my laptop again and rewatched the video, this time noticing something I'd missed before. When Grant leaned toward Carol, he slid a flash drive across her desk. She hesitated, then picked it up. And in the reflection of the glass window behind her, I could see it. The same flash drive, marked with a small red sticker. A sudden thought struck me. That drive might still be out there. Carol was on the run. But if she hid it somewhere or sent it to someone, that could be the key to everything. And maybe, just maybe, the person sending me those anonymous messages wanted me to find it. I looked out the window one last time before locking it shut. Mom, I whispered softly, I think this is bigger than I ever imagined. The wind howled outside, rattling the glass, as my phone buzzed again, a final message lighting up the screen. She left something for you, Emily. Look under the oak tree. I stood frozen, staring at those words. The oak tree, the one by my mother's grave. My hands trembled as I realized what that meant. Whatever Carol had been hiding, whatever secret had cost her everything, it was waiting for me there. And in that instant, I knew this wasn't over. Not even close.